For a long time on this show, we've spoken about how the Western world, particularly the English-speaking Western world, has fallen into a kind of cultural self-indulgence, a state in which we take our peace for granted and our liberties for granted, a state in which we've been hypercritical of ourselves to a damaging degree, in some kind of over-the-top virtue signalling self-flagellation that focuses on the sins of our history rather than all the good that we've brought to the world in the past and the present. We've been feeling as though we owe a debt to the other cultures of the world. It's kind of patronising, really, us assuming that they are not big and strong enough to take care of themselves, or worse, take care of us in a not so friendly way. We've become very, very cocky in a roundabout kind of fashion. We think we have no enemies that want to attack us, that we are the all-powerful evil colonisers, so we couldn't possibly be attacked. It's an insane narrative built on identity politics and neo-Marxist, new Marxism sort of nonsense. Our enemies are actually laughing at our stupidity and our self-destruction. But they shouldn't make the big mistake of thinking that this glitch in our culture has fundamentally changed most of us or made us any less likely to firmly defend ourselves against any possible attack. The two big threats to the liberal democratic Judeo-Christian Western world order have always been communism and Islamic extremism. We'd always been united in our awareness of those threats and we understood them. But 30 years or so ago, all that started to change a bit. Once the Berlin Wall fell in 1989 and the Cold War came to an end as we once knew it, the United States became the dominant superpower in the world, and we got a little too comfortable as one of their main allies. Fears of a rise of Islamism or communism kind of abated. Russia was no longer a threat. China was opening up and becoming our friend, in business at least, and the Arab world was changing. We developed an almost naive perspective that in this new world order, everyone would be friendly and operate out of rational self-interest for mutual benefit in a liberal, free trade-oriented kind of benevolent utopia of globalization. Anyone who suggested that Islamism might pose a threat to the West and its Judeo-Christian ethos was labelled an Islamophobic racist. Anyone who suggested China would seek to become expansionist or revert to the highly oppressive, authoritarian-style communism of the Mao era was mocked and laughed at as being hysterical racists worried about Reds under the bed, you crazy cookers. This was one of the failings of the way that Barack Obama engaged with China and the Pacific during his 2 terms as US president. He assumed everyone in the world thought just like we did. The mistake of thinking that our Western values just fell out of the sky and were universally shared by all. That China would never become a hostile threat, never clamp down on Hong Kong and its freedoms, never really seek to take Taiwan seriously. And yet here we are, on the brink of war with Russia, Iran and China, all at once. And that's the problem. Australia's longest-serving Foreign Affairs Minister and former High Commissioner to the United Kingdom, Alexander Downer, has issued a stark warning about one possible scenario that could unfold if all 3 of those potential conflicts did erupt at the same time. He's told former Deputy Prime Minister John Anderson on his podcast channel this week that it's not unrealistic to think that we really could be on the brink of a 3rd World War. Now, while he's quick to stress that it's just one scenario and maybe not the most probable one, it is a possible scenario in the way that it hasn't been possible for decades.
In some respects, I think it is the most dangerous time since the 1930s. If you like, I think there is a risk of world war, the like of which there hasn't been since the end of the Second World War.
Mr. Downer told John Anderson that the way a world war could develop is that with the Ukrainian war continuing, the Middle East Palestinian resistance to Israel, and the China-Taiwan issue all happening at once, a catastrophic scenario could emerge like this.
So the Middle East could spread. Iran could decide to unleash Hezbollah to the north of Israel and unleash Palestinian resistance on the West Bank, coupled with their continuing support for Hamas, leading to an American intervention as Israel's situation became increasingly desperate. and the Chinese taking advantage of that. Because one of the things the media don't cover this very often, but you have to realize the Chinese, the Russians, and the Iranians are all talking to each other the whole time.
I'm sorry, what? The Chinese, the Russians, and the Iranians are all talking to each other the whole time?
They're in constant contact. They know exactly what each other are doing. And they do work together in a kind of loose alliance. And if they unleash this loose alliance against the West, then, and that could happen through accident, if you like, through miscalculation. The Iranians could overreach in their support for Hezbollah and other groups that they do support, like the Houthis. They could overreach. That could lead to the Americans having to become involved. And at the same time, the Chinese could opportunistically see this as a way of introducing, perhaps to start with, a modest blockade of Taiwan, as America is distracted in the Middle East and in Ukraine. And in those circumstances, the Americans would have to do something about the blockade of Taiwan as well.
Mr. Downer was at pains to stress that this is not necessarily what will happen, but that it is a scenario where it could. So how do we resist all of this? Well, not by being in any way woke or timid in our resolve to protect our own societies and way of life, but by sending firm signals to the Russians and the Chinese and Iran that the West is just as determined to defend itself now as at any other time in history.
And the way to resist that is to make it perfectly clear, the West, to make it perfectly clear that we will be ruthless in prosecuting our interests, not that we will be half-hearted or uncertain, which is what we've been over the last 20 years.
Ruthless. Peace through strength. It's the only language that communists and jihadists understand. As Jordan Peterson says, the good man is one who is capable of exacting great and powerful damage upon evil, but who never acts on that unnecessarily. President Xi and Putin and Iran's Ayatollah would perhaps be wise to not assume the West's liberalism and softness and temporary insanity at the moment with all this woke nonsense means that we in any way have become less likely to resist their tyranny any less ruthlessly than before. Did you know lots of Aussie YouTubers have to make American content to survive? We want to keep producing Aussie news, and to do that, we need your direct help. If you'd like to advertise on our show, please get in touch in the comments below or DM us on Twitter. Our Australian content means we deliver mostly an Aussie audience. Or if you'd just like to help us with a donation, please click on the Super Thanks button that's with the little $sign right under the video frame just here. Or just click the subscribe button and bell. That's free and it helps a lot.